Hello and welcome to the DM's Book Club, a weekly book club podcast where we talk about some Dungeons and Dragons and discuss how we might include it in our role-playing campaigns. With me for the first time, I'm so excited to have this wonderful person on this podcast. We have Emily Bates. Emily, hello, my friend.
Hi, Fiona. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for agreeing to come on. We sound very excited because we've been able in the last couple of months to actually work together on various RPG projects, and now it's like, here's another one, Emily Bates.
Emily, do more. Let's do it. I will always say yes to you, Fiona. Always, forever.
How did you get into RPGs, Emily Bates?
How did I get into RPGs? I don't know what edition it was, but some form of D&D.
Yeah.
When I was 18 with my boyfriend and his family at the time, because his dad was really into it, like in the 80s. And it was me, my boyfriend, his brother. I think it was just the three of us, actually, and then his dad running it. I made this little like halfling rogue character. I can't remember if she was a rogue, but I think she was. And I was just obsessed with the idea that you rolled these dice for stats. And I had a really bad one. And I was like, oh my God, this is excellent. And so I put it straight into intelligence and was like, she's going to be really stupid. Because I was kind of a bit nervous to play. And I was like, oh, if I make her really stupid, then I've got excuses to be bad at things.
It's a role play thing.
Yeah. And anyway, so I got really into it and I started doing really stupid things. I was probably quite an annoying player. But I was really trying to be in character, and I was a little theatre kid, so I was very much like going full in. And my boyfriend got really mad at me, and we had a big argument about it. So yeah, and then I didn't play for years until like probably after uni. And then a group of friends were like, hey, does anyone want to play D&D? And I was like, oh, I played that before. Like, I don't know if I like it or not. And I sort of described what happened. And they were like, no, you should try it again because I feel like you will love this, Emily. You're a huge nerd.
Yes.
Like, okay, yeah, fine. And I made a rogue again because I love a rogue. But I made a dragonborn rogue, which you know, when you first make a character and you don't give a single thought to optimization, you're just like, I want to be a dragon person. Yep. And I want to do stabby sneaky. And so I was this giant red dragonborn, like just going around stabbing people. It was great. And so made that character, loved her. And then just sort of slowly but surely started playing it more and more until Shamini Bundell asked if I wanted to be part of this group she was putting together of people who make science videos as science communicators, which is my day job, who playing D&D or just general role-playing games. And that's how RP Geeks was born.
Yeah.
Yes. And here we are now. And now I do this all the time and I love it.
Yeah. It's honestly absolute joy. Please go and check out RP Geeks for a whole range of RPGs, not just D&D.
Yes.
First of all, that origin of like playing with your partner's family, that sounds like a lot of pressure, I'll be honest.
So his parents were quite young when they had him.
Right.
And then it was only his brother was born a few years later. So really, I think his parents were like late 30s, early 40s kind of thing. And so they were quite a close-knit family. And I really got on with the brother. And he'd made like this big like barbarian Goliath kind of, you know, classic hit things hard. So we became like a little like duo of like he would pick me up and like throw me and
of course,
the classic.
Yeah, the banjo kazooie type thing. Yeah.
And then my partner, I think he was probably a cleric. But he was some kind of like magic user.
Right.
And I think we probably left him out a little bit. Like, I think maybe me and the brother were having such a good time.
Yeah, chaos.
Like doing this silly thing. And because like, I think it was my boyfriend's idea who wanted to play.
Right.
And his dad, like they were kind of having like nerdy, like D&D stats, like numbers. And me and the brother got much more into the role play side of it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I love stats. I'm a big number nerd as well. So... But at the time, I think it probably was slightly on me. But I remember being really annoyed because I was like, I'm having a really good time. And you're telling me my fun is wrong. And I was like, my fun isn't wrong here. Like, no. I'm having a great day.
Me and your brother seem to be doing well. So that's 2 out of the 3 of the party.
And I think the dad was having a lovely time as well. Yeah. I hope they're all doing well. If you're listening, hello.
I hope you're all well. You started my origin story. So how did you go from then playing in these games to then actually running? Because you've run quite a few different systems now.
Yeah. So I said I started playing that game after uni, and we played that for a good few months. And then I think it was a while later, actually. I think we played that for a bit. And then that group, as D&D campaigns are wont to do, it just sort of died. And, you know, people stopped talking to other people, and it just sort of
it breaks up, the lifespans,
And it was like my secret. Like I didn't tell anyone I played D&D because that would be so lame. And I was cool, like, you know, I was a cool musical theatre kid because that's cool. So I didn't like have anyone else that I could even be like, I'm really sad my D&D game's cancelled, because I just didn't tell anyone about it.
Yeah.
And then I think it was Sharmony again. This is way before RP Geeks. She'd started playing with a group that we'd done a show together, and she started playing with another group as part of that. And I wasn't playing as part of it, but they told me about Critical Role, and I started watching Critical Role. And I probably watched Critical Role for about a year before I played again. And then it was that group, they invited me in, and then I was like, like these people are great, but they weren't like my closest friends. Yeah. And by this point, I'd started accepting the fact that I was a huge nerd and was more willing to like, you know, embrace it. I think I was just chatting to someone and they were like, I've always wanted to play D&D. And I was like, you know what? I've been watching enough and like, I feel like I could run this. And I made up like this whole homebrew world, which is still the world I use if I ever run a homebrew game.
Yeah. I
still have the book somewhere. I've just got like pages of me like drawing out maps, coming up with characters. Like I have all these NPCs in my world that no one's ever met. Because there's no reason for them to exist, because what I did was I went through all the tables and I made a party that was all the first ones and then all the last ones was one character. And it was, do you know what I mean? So there's one character who's like a bard. What's probably the first letter in the alphabet on when it comes to races? What comes up first? Dwarf?
It would dwarf in the player's handbook, yeah.
Yeah, so basically that's what I did. I went through the player's handbook and I was like, right, I'll just take the first one of every list. And then I took the last one of every list. So it's like a warlock, like Yuan-Ti warlock or something.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I made all these characters just using like stupid little logic games that I came up with myself.
Cool.
Yeah, and I just started running, like, I did a lot of one-shots because I didn't think anyone would want to play full games with me. And then when pandemic hit, a group, the RP Geeks plus some others, I started running modules during that because we just wanted to play, and that's right before RP Geeks launched actually. And yeah, we started running Order of the Dragon Queen. We're still running it. I tore that module to pieces, but I will say, like, you know, I do like a module. I like having the framework. I rip them to shreds a lot of the time.
I'm exactly the same because I'm running through Curse of Strahd just now, and
I've never played it and I don't know anything about it. I am spoiler free.
No spoilers. And it's what's interesting is that there's loads of other supplements I've obviously changed things out. It's one of the most played ones. I'm definitely someone who never really homebrews much myself. I literally am just like, I will take the scenario, I will read it through and go, oh, this is really cool as a base, and then be able to go off and jump off like that. I always need a ground. I need a structure of some sort. I don't want people to ask too many questions, because then I can go back to a base answer, and if I don't like the base answer, I can change it for something else.
Yeah, 100%.
Because as well as sometimes with world building as well, because sometimes I won't have an answer for something, and then people will ask questions about it, and I'm like, well, I've not thought about the logic behind it, and then I don't want it to fall down and then embrace the immersion. So that's something on me as well. But that's what we're coming here to talk about today. I'll have you back on to talk about Horde of the Dragon Queen. That's something I've not read either, but I know, look at your face.
Don't make me do it. I don't want to.
But today we're talking about Wild Beyond the Witchlight, which I'm very excited to talk about because we have covered it slightly on DM's Book Club before. We did it like our first impressions. It was in the time before we weren't able to get like proper digital releases of stuff, and it would appear on the day, and I'd have like 2 hours to read through, and I only managed at the time to read through that first chapter, which I very much enjoyed. And now talking to someone who is actually running a Wild Beyond Witchlight for group as well, and now having run it, it's just something I'd love to talk through it, because it's one of the more recent published adventures that's come out. It's sort of well known for it being like, you could go through this scenario without killing, or we're really out fighting.
I would like to talk about that later, because I think there's a big, everyone says that, and I'm like, yeah, if you're horrible, like we'll come to that, but
lots of selling points in the sense of like, we're going into the Feywild. They had all the stuff about Domains of Delight, and a really like what it seems like a setup of like going into Prismere, there's sort of hither, there and yon, all this sort of like, and an amazing carnival. So, and it looks absolutely spectacular. Like the artwork in it is absolutely gorgeous.
It's gorgeous. There's images that I've like printed off and stuck like on laminated and stuck on my wall, because I think it is so beautiful. Like straight off the bat, like this is my favorite module that I've read of any of fifth edition. I like the vibe. It's like, you're not your stereotypical fantasy adventure, off we go. No. It's got this like quirky, whimsy is a word I heard get used about it a lot, and it's fully whimsical, and I love it. I really do.
It's very whimsical, and it's also very soft as well. I think a lot of adventures we've seen, you see the covers, it's like Descent into Avernus, Dragonlance, and then this one, it's like the inner artwork has got butterfly wings. There's a lot of things about butterfly, and it's very wholesome. But then when you dive in a little bit deeper, you have that proper Grimm's fairy tale like bit about it. I've just finished watching Never After on Dimension 20, which is all these fairy tales that have been slightly twisted. And for me, because obviously, as you know, Emily Bates, that I'm a little queen of horror. I'm like there going, good.
Fiona.
Me, Fiona Howard.
Very rare for me to be on a call with you where you don't have like black makeup covering your eyes and
or drawing something
drawing
on my face
on them. Yeah.
I think for me, because I was reading it through, and a lot of it is very much like, oh, it's a great place, ha ha ha. And then you read sort of like the agenda a little bit behind the intent. You're like, ooh, this is pretty dark for what is seen as very soft, almost like ice cream flavored stuff. And I really like that. The idea that you could just turn up the creepiness or turn up the sort of the sinisterness of the vibe of the Feywild. Because that's the thing, the Feywild is not a safe place. Ooh. It is one of bargains. It is one of taking things away and cursing people to have these really horrible, very tricksy curses, which I absolutely love. And that's the thing I'd like to get onto, is just talking about like, how do you get your players to really engage with these, maybe thinking outside the box solutions for people who are trapped in Prismere under the sort of influence of what has been happening in this particular domain.
Just to touch on like what I said about like how I rip adventures apart.
Yeah.
This is the first one I haven't felt the need to rip it apart at all.
Interesting.
One, because it begins with we're fully spoilers in this?
Yeah, I'll say that now. So we are going to go deep dive in. It's been out for a couple of years now, and you can get it on D&D Beyond and stuff like that. But we're going to go in and rip as much of it as part as we can within the time that we've got.
Talk about the big spoilers and everything.
100%. It's very hard not to talk about the big
spoiler is so cool if you know any D&D lore. Like when I read that, I was like, holy shit. I really lame. It was my first holiday away after lockdown. In fact, the only holiday I've had since lockdown. And the book arrived like the day before I went. And I went on a solo holiday and I sat on the beach with While Beyond the Witchlight, and I just read the whole thing on a beach in Tenerife.
Such a nerd.
And I was like, if anyone watched me, they'd be like, oh, look at that cool girl lying on a beach reading a book. And then they'd be
D&D.
Like, why is it a Dungeons and Dragons book? You start off at this carnival, which is sort of traveling, Feywild Carnival. But obviously, because it's a traveling carnival, you don't have to be on the Sword Coast. You don't have to be in Faerun or wherever. You just put it in your world. So again, I just shoved it straight into my world. I've run this for a couple of groups now, 2 of which we've done the first session and everyone had a lovely time. But then
we've not replied back to the doodle poll yet.
Yeah. And it's like, I can't keep asking because I feel embarrassed. But then the other group that I most recently started running with just before Christmas was a group of friends from uni who have never played D&D. And since I've, become more vocal with my geekery, they were like, Emily, would you like to run a D&D game for us? But I know them all through theatre. And I think people say it right. This is D&D for theatre kids.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Which is probably why it's my favourite, because the characters in it are beautifully done. Like they're really fleshed out, or mostly really fleshed out. They've got these role-playing cards at the back of the book, which I ignore because I get ideas for how I think characters should be in my head. But they're so good for someone who isn't necessarily as into the role-playing stuff, and you're like, oh, okay, I just need to be a little bit more like curt with this character, less helpful, but you can drop it anywhere. Like you drop the carnival in, there's no link to the material plane. Once you're in the carnival, you're then going through the crossing to the Feywild, and then you're in the Feywild and you're in this domain. There's sort of a lot of themes throughout the book. They talk about the number 3 and the number 8. Number 8, I don't think is as obvious.
It really is
but
not.
Number 3 is there a lot.
Yeah, the three is absolutely there a lot. Yeah, I was struggling with 8. I think 8 comes up when it talks about the cauldron stuff later on, but that's the only thing I could really pick as a look through. But yeah, just to go back to what you're saying about one of the things I really like about this module, so I do think it's aimed at maybe the first time DM a little bit, the way it's structured, because you do have those, you said, those role-playing cards at the back. And one thing I've noticed with D&D recently, when they're doing adventures, they'll try and like, here's something to track your progress.
Story tracker. Yeah.
That's sort of to use to sort of for you and the players to document your time at the carnival, so in that first chapter, but also to be like, note down stuff that they might be missing as well, because you have 2 openers that you can use.
The hooks, yes. Yeah. I love the hooks. Well, I love one of the hooks, and I think the other one is fine if that's what your group wants. So there's the no prizes for guessing. Anyone who knows the book, which one's my favorite? The Lost Things hook, I just think is great. Like we talk about first time DMs, I think this is such a good first time player module.
100%.
Because Lost Things Adventure hook, they can create whatever character they want, and then you go, okay, cool. Like when you're a kid, you went to this carnival. I kind of wish there was a way that you didn't have to have all of the characters sneaking in to like, I tried to think of a different way, but I just said, look, you were all kids and you did it, deal with it.
Yeah.
And then you've lost this item, and it's never like, you know, a teddy bear. It's your sense of joy or whatever. There's one of the hags will have it, and then they'll have a little minor curse on them. And I think the minor curses are so cute. I keep forgetting about them, like, because there's some characters that like have to knock on a door before they can go through any door, which I just think is great. Awful for stealth missions. Like, there's one of the characters in my group, they have the one which is you can't tie knots. And so they've got Velcro shoes, which is just,
that's very wholesome.
It's just cute. Like, and it's just like a little thing. Oh, they've lost their musical ability as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and they're not a bard, but basically they were like, oh, well, if I ever get it back, maybe I'll take a level in bard. And I was like,
oh, I love that.
And this is a first time player, just like suddenly being like engaged in how this character trait could feed into like a mechanic later down the line. And that's the best way mechanics work, is when you're like, my character would like to be singing songs now, so I'll take a level in bard, in my opinion anyway.
Because so this idea that they lose something that is, it always is like sort of a role play thing rather than a mechanic thing necessarily. And I will say, I agree with you, the Lost Things hook is nice because, again, I think there's something magical about playing younger selves sort of adventurers in stories and seeing that development, that you are remembering stuff from the past. There's an RPG that I've read through recently called Here We Used to Fly, which is this idea of these adults going back to a theme park they used to go to as kids.
Very similar.
You go to the attractions as kids and you have experience, and then you come back and the theme park's now abandoned, and it's about like reflecting on the attractions as you're there and as the kids and adults. And there's just something beautiful about being able to do that. And I think that as a D&D thing, and as certainly as we're going into roleplay stuff, it totally makes sense. Whereas the other one is like, a warlock thinks there's something wrong, so you go ahead, you're like, okay, I guess.
I'm like, I don't think it's a bad hook.
No, it's fine.
If you've got characters that are maybe already in the world and you've already done like a one shot or something with them, and then maybe, I mean, I still think you should tie it in somehow and make like him someone's granddad or do something.
Yeah, a personal connection for sure.
The good thing about that background is it wants you to get to the final chapter of the adventure.
Yes,
the
absolutely.
Lost Things arc with my group, you know, one of them now has recovered one of their items. There's still another 4 of them. Like, they kind of made a joke of, oh, I guess I can go back now. And he's not going to. Like, it was a joke, but I think they're all starting to realise there's bigger stuff going on, and they maybe need to help out in general. But they don't have to. Like, they could all get their items back and be like, okay, you deal with this.
We're going to nope out of this.
Frozen Archfey. I'm not dealing with that. Goodbye. Who's Zabilna? I don't know. And so the Warlock one does give you a much stronger link to the final, to the end game.
Yeah.
And so I think like you have to add in other ways potentially as a GM to make sure they're properly invested.
That's my biggest criticism of this story that I also, so like, you know, you start off with this incredible carnival, which in itself, there's like history about it not being the owner's original carnival.
Yes. Van Richten's.
Which I absolutely love. So again, you think, so are we just going to be all about the carnival? So you're like, no, we're going to blast past that and we're going to go into this other story, which I really enjoy. I love stuff about the Hourglass Coven, all that sort of thing.
Love the Coven, yeah.
I love stuff like that. But then, for me as a player, like, right, we're going to go rescue our bits. And then obviously as you're there, you're supposed to get these sort of like hints of like, these 3 awful people have taken over and frozen the Archfey at the centre of this place in Heart's Desire. There is no motive for you to do that other than there's this idea of etiquette, these laws about the Feywild, about if you are polite and you give back what you receive and all that sort of thing, which I absolutely love as a roleplay thing. But as players, you might be like, well, times are ticking. We want to go to Dragonlance.
Well, we know how to leave. Yeah,
exactly.
Right, exactly. So I'm putting in things. I'm actually talking of the carnival in like Van Richten's. One of the things that I've started doing in the game is because I loved the Domains of Dread in Van Richten's guide. And then when I saw Domains of Delight, I was like, I wonder what the crossover is. And there is none in the book other than, I mean, it barely even mentions in this book that there's the other carnival in Domains of Dread.
It is, it's such a slight question.
And it's like, come on, like, it's not even like 2 separate carnivals. Like, the owners swapped. Like, that's the reason there are Shadowkai in And I just was like, in my head, I was like, there'll be something to do with this later. No. Sly Flourish, the lazy dungeon master. I watched one of his like streams he did, and he was talking about this right before I ran it. I was basically consuming all content around Wild Beyond the Witchlight before I ran it. He was like, I'm going to do a thing where, because Zybilna is frozen, the domains of dread and the domains of delight are starting to like the layers are tearing, and so bits of domains of dread are coming into the domains of delight.
Oh, brilliant.
And it changes the vibe of the game a little bit when it happens. But I've got my players now terrified of hearing any ripping noises. And so, because they hear it and then a portal will open and like a basilisk will come out or something. And I'm sort of trying to tease some various bits. And so far it's been quite small things that they've sort of easily dealt with, but I'm going to sort of make it bigger and bigger and bigger. And the idea being, Zybilna was the one who was able to keep this domain of delight separate. And okay, the big spoiler, Zybilna is obviously Tasha. What? The Witch Queen? What? Who obviously, and I think it does talk about it in the book, how, you know, she's not this all good, wonderful archfey. Like, she's very powerful, but, you know, Domain of Delight makes you think of like a happy, lovely thing. And and I quite like the idea that actually Charisma was potentially beginning to shift into a Domain of Dread anyway. And they were, and like the Dark Powers were going to actually like trap Zybilna here to like, not attain. Atone to atone for like previous stuff she'd done when she, you know, evil Tasha.
Like demons, magic, all that sort of thing. And then to come to the Feywild and then be like, oh, actually become good. And the whole stuff right at the end. Well, I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, but the Heart's Desire, and you see her evil stuff that's been manifest as these horrible creatures in a cradle. And you're like, right, shut that door. We're not
don't want that one.
It's like,
I forgot about that, you know? Yes. There's some, it's rough.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, her jealousy, all this sort of thing. And obviously if you free them or anything like that, that affects the ending. And but even just like something simple, and it's just, again, it's a credit to the writers thinking of things that are just like hinting at stuff, because again, as we're going into sort of the Fey and Feywild, naming is very important. So this idea of like, you know, someone's true name, you can hold a little bit of power to help them or hinder them. And there's just this bit where you go into some sort of wardrobe and you see all these different costumes of Tasha and Zybilna, and there's like a little small girl one wearing a witch's costume, etc., and it just says Natasha. So that's just a hint for the final puzzle at the end, which easily players could miss and stuff like that. But there was such a beautiful little detail that I was like, wow, that's actually quite impactful as a player, just seeing all these costumes, like a gallery essentially. And just being like, this is where we are now, but look at the person before. And then the ones of like the sort of the glass jars of like
with the heads,
the heads of like, you know, before, now, and older. Just again, they're very visual. There's some really cool visual stuff, certainly in that Heart's Desire, which is also a great name. There's a lot of really cool names of places.
Palace of Heart's Desire. It's like, and Hither, Thither, and Yon. It's just, that's great. Nice. Like that. Appreciate that. In the first chapter, when you can walk past the little statue of Tasha, because it's talking about Tasha's hideous laughter, and it casts Tasha's hideous laughter on anyone that goes past. And you would just think, like, my players, the ones I'm playing with currently, they don't know who Tasha is. No. But because of that statue, I made them do a history check. Someone rolled high enough. I gave them a little bit of lore about Tasha. And I know they've got that in their notes now. And like, just hopefully, and like, I'll give it to them, you know, probably no matter what. Chapter 1, there are so many points where you write down if something happens. And in later chapters, you know, the one that always sticks in my head is if people take part in the snail race in chapter 1, when they come across the snail in chapter 2, they can roll advantage on the animal handling check. And it's as simple as that. But, you know, what you can do as a DM is to describe, like, thinking back on the race and how you were the one who won, and so suddenly you feel this affinity with giant snails, and you remember your snail Buttercup and how he liked to be scratched behind the ears, and so you do this with this one, and it turns out he loves it too. And you know, so you can just, it gives it a little flavor, and it enhances for players the idea that, hey, what you do matters potentially down the line.
Absolutely.
It's not just here's a puzzle, solve it, move on. Like, your choices you've made earlier are going to affect what happens.
Yeah, all those carnival games, they either end up with like an advantage or, like you said, a bit helping a puzzle. Like the one I remember is the singing lesson one that the mermaid gives, and there's the acting one which helps a lot right at the end.
Big help.
And again, it's one of those things where at the beginning, I found recently a lot of published adventures, there is always like a festival or there's a carnival, and there are games that the players can take part in, which are super fun. I think it's like the new shopping episodes that we have.
Yes.
And I have no problem with that, but I do think it ties into the fact that you can't skip the carnival. You have to take part in it to an extent, just to get even some clues and hindsight and stuff. So even with that warlock introduction of like, please go check up, my patron's not been answering my calls, you have to take part a little bit and understand why this carnival is so important, not just to Mr. Witch and Mr. Light, who also have some incredible backstories that we don't get to see too much.
And they barely talk about it. And it's like, oh, come on, give me.
Yeah.
So that's my biggest dislike with the book as a whole, is there are some really interesting backstory bits that I think it hides in various places.
Absolutely.
Like little text boxes. My game have just recently spoken to Clapperclaw.
Oh, yeah.
And I love Clapperclaw, the little scarecrow with pincers for hands.
Terrifying.
And then like a Gordon, they want to try and find his actual head. But he was created by Scabatha, and that is there, but it's like one sentence that you could so easily miss. But the idea is all of the guides, so the ones that can take you from one place to another, the reason they're guides is because they all, at some stage, worked for a hag. So they're not these like helpful little things. Like they were made by the evil people. And I hadn't clocked that when I first introduced him. And then I read it again when we were going back to our next session, and I was like, oh, that's so different. And I just missed it. And I feel like there's quite a lot of little bits that if you don't read the whole book before you start, like I don't think you can prepare for your next session, if that makes sense. I think you have to know the full thing going into it. That's obviously a good thing, but I think it can be overwhelming because it's a big book.
It is a big book.
Like, it's not a little one.
No, and there's a lot to it, even though with like, because you have, once you've done the carnival, you go to each of the lands in turn. Through, again, it's quite prescriptive in the sense of it. You go here, 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 and here.
Well, it is. However, then this, like, this is something, again, sorry, this is very recency bias on my part. But there's the balloons in Hither. And you're kind of expected to steal one of the balloons and go to thither with your guide, Clapperclaw. Great, easy. There is just a little line, I'll see if I can find it, where they're just like, oh, if you steal this balloon, it'll just take you to Yon. It's like, wait, what? And it's like, so am I meant to then just skip Hither? And like, you can go back, you can go different directions, but it feels very like, that would be very bad for your character level and the things you're going to be fighting.
Because it goes all the way up to level 8, right? That's the sort of level you're supposed to be right at the end when you get to Heart's Desire. Ideally, it should be Carnival, Hither, Thither, Yon, and then Palace of Heart's Desire. Yes. But as you said, if they decide to go somewhere else, they can certainly get there. It's just very hard to get to Palace of Heart's Desire straight away because of the crumbling bridges, etc. And each of the realms, so to speak, they have a couple of areas of interest, and then they go to the hag's sort of lair and their workshop or whatever, and then has a little bit about them. There's definitely feelings of like a Spirited Away, certainly in that first one, which I love, this idea of like the baths, etc. And she's dries out. It's like this horrible frog toad like creature. Love her. And then there's like a workshop where there's children working for toys and stuff like that. And then the final one, which is obviously this big theatre on the top of a mountainside.
With like lightning always hitting around it. Like, oh, yes.
I can't remember the name of the theatre per se.
Motherhorn, I think? Or is that the mountain?
That's the mountain, I think. But in the real world, in our world, there's in Cornwall, there's that theatre that's...
I'm
talking to a theatre kid, so that hopefully they will know.
Oh gosh, not the Menier. No. What's it called?
Yeah, the one that's sort of into
I know exactly the
cliff way, and it is very impressive, very, very great. Minack. Yeah, the Minack Theatre, which is just basically, it is just carved into the side of a cliff, and then you have the sea behind you, and it's just absolutely impressive. So that's what I was thinking when I was seeing that particular in Yon, this sort of theatre. I will say some of the locations I find, some of the sort of encounters you can have, they are very whimsical and sort of fairy tale like, and they have a little bits of effects on stuff. But ultimately, you could just be like, I'm just going to go straight to the hag's lair. I don't need to do all this extra stuff.
And a lot of it is like, here's a person who's sad.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Go help them. And I would say if you are going to run this adventure, it will help for continuity and like keeping your players moving. If you have players creating characters who want to help people, I think it would be really hard to run an evil Wild Beyond the Witchlight, because for a start they're going to get to the carnival and just cause chaos, which could be fun, but also probably they're going to get kicked out, which isn't ideal. And there is a lot of, why has no one else tried to help this person? It does feel like you're the first people who have ever been here who have any way of helping anything, which I guess is fine, but it doesn't, there's a lot of characters that feel like they've probably been that way for a while. And it's like, oh, it doesn't feel like a fresh thing is happening and you've come across a thing happening. And there's a couple of bits that I think are quite good for it. Like, I really like the bullywugs.
Yeah, the whole section of like the idea that there's a kingdom of bullywugs, and it sounds like every day there's a new king in my head. Like, and they go through this sort of like these coups and the kings, and they're all equally frightened creatures that have no power.
They're frogs.
They're frogs. And the artwork for them is beautiful as well. And I just like this idea of like, that's such a passing thing. But I can imagine if you impress the king and stuff like that, the sort of courtiers might be able to help you. The king can't help you at all because they're useless.
Absolutely useless.
Yeah, that was quite a really nice flavour and stuff. And the fairy dragon that you come across right at the beginning,
Sir
Talifat, who has again an absolutely cracking picture of a pink dragon with a moustache, little moustache, who frankly gets hardly any screen time.
He deserves a lot more screen time, and just sort of casually mentions Titania.
Yeah,
and just like, I'm from the Summer Court, Queen Titania, and I was like, I want to know more about Queen Titania. Where's the book with Queen Titania in? Wizards, please? Sadly, Why?
Pointless.
Doesn't need to be there.
Yeah.
I haven't got to those points yet in the book. I'm considering taking them out.
I would too. I think it makes sense in the sense of like, how are they controlling stuff while not being at the Heart's Desire and having ways for the influence to still be held by people who, other adventurers. There's this thing of like having rival teams of adventurers against each other, which I'm a big fan of.
Yeah.
But I will say, I find both these teams, these little factions, super boring. There's nothing redeemable. And also, I think a lot of them are humanoid. And when you meet stuff like, the fairy dragon knight, you're like...
whimsy, fun, yes. Also, League of Malevolence, Vala's Call. I know it's all based on like old school D&D, like factions and things. But they're so, here is the evil team and here is the good team. And it's not my fave.
It felt like they suffered a lot in terms of like putting stuff in. They're like, we have to cut stuff. And I think like any of their backstory, like the role playing stuff for them right at the back feels very much non-existent. Like a couple of them, like Vala's Call, they're there in some of the locations and they're like, we're struggling because our leaders are frozen in the palace, etc. And there's a really cool moment where one of them, can't remember which one, they're blasted back in time.
They're frozen, aren't they, in the above the like drop
the maelstrom
down.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, if you reverse the freezing that's happening at the palace, they're going to fall. And I love that. That's like a great peril thing and a very great visual thing. But other than that, I couldn't care less about them.
I like that you've got like, I think it's Skylar,
this sort of evil betrayer of the villains. Yeah,
Endelyn Moongrave foresaw that Skylar's allies would turn on her one day and shared this information with the warlock, and she now works for Endelyn.
Yeah.
And it's like, but then alignment, chaotic evil, and it's like, oh shit.
Yeah, pretty bad.
And Baba Yaga is her patron. So the mother of the coven and Tasha. So it's like, oh, what? You're working for your patron's daughter? Cool, I guess. Like, call your mum. Like, they do feel a little bit like put in there to have more things to do in the later chapters.
Yeah.
My group are really enjoying it and they're liking all the little like things they've had to do. I worry they're feeling a little bit like, okay, we have this task, we must complete this task. Like to the point that one of them was like, I'm going to make a bullet point list of things we need to do. And I was like, I don't feel like you should have to do that. Like, I feel like you should have your motivations for wanting to go a certain way.
You go with your gut. Yeah, absolutely.
But they're a new group. So for them, probably actually it is. I'm probably breeding a very like healthy, will help save the town group of role players. So we'll go with that.
You want them to do that. Yeah, absolutely. what's interesting with each of the hags as well, again, much later on at the back of the book, and it's something I kind of wish was at the beginning of the book for the DM, is that these three sisters, they all hate each other.
Yes.
They hate each other for different reasons, and there's curse on one of them.
And like, this one hates this one who hates this one. It goes around in circles.
And they're all feeding off each other or spying off each other. Yeah. But they all have, like, you know, again, something I didn't realize, that one of them is about the past, one of them is about the future, and one is about the present. That's how they do packs and stuff like that. And I think that's the thing. Another thing that was missing, particularly for me, was that it would be nice if they had some example packs.
That would be good.
Because the one in the middle, Scabatha
Nightshade,
has these posters of Will of the Wild, who's supposed to be like a Robin Hood-esque type character, or Peter Pan even, that's sort of like saving the children of the forest. And she has these wanted posters up where she goes, if you bring him back alive, I will give you the strength of an octopus. Yeah. And you're like, oh, and then you realise that octopuses are very weak for whatever reason. She's got lots of arms. I like the phrasing of that, because it was like, oh yeah, this sounds really good. If it's a cool reward, and actually it's not a good reward. And I want to see more examples of that, because like me as Fiona, I'm very bad at coming up with like, can I have your name? A moment of your time?
They're the bits I need help with, like the clever little like nudges of like, oh wait, something's a little bit off here. That's what I like things to have. Is it Bavlorna is the past, Scabatha is the present?
I think it's the other way around. I think Bavlorna is the present, because that's the first one you meet, and then the past is all about toys and nostalgia and Scabatha.
And then Endlin is definitely the future, because she's the one who has the like visions and things like that.
Yeah, she definitely leans into her vibe quite a bit as the as this like the gothic sort of like puppet show, and she had that encounter with like the sort of traveling wagon that then replays stuff, and I'm like, this is absolute wild Doctor Who shit happening here. I'm absolutely here for it, but my god,
and that is what we want. I like how they're sisters and they all look so different. That's something that I'm like, you don't look like sisters, but you know, who am I to judge? But they're Fey, aren't they? They've kind of taken on their shape, and
they take on their shape, and it's that twisted macabre stuff. Going back to it as well, again, you think hags, warty witches, etc. But then you have one, like I said, like looks like a toad. You have one that's like a doll on a rocking horse type thing, and then you've got one who's just like some sort of machine, essentially.
Does all those arms and like the puppets and
inside her,
like just like a skeleton, basically.
With a big veil on.
Yeah,
for me, it's something beyond what I would imagine, and I just hope that is something that when you show the players what they look like, they go, "We are in trouble."
Yeah, I think that like my players are about to meet Bavlorna like in person for the first time, and they're fully ready. They're like, we're going to kill her, and I'm like, no, okay. There's 5 of them. They're all level 3, and she is challenge 7. And I'm like, I'm going to swallow one of you. Like, I'm going to do it. Like, she'll do it.
It's going to happen.
That's the thing Bavlorna does. She can like detach her jaw and like swallow a character, a small one. But we've got there's a halfling in the party. They're going down.
You target that one. It's like you're going in here.
You're coming in the mouth. But I do like the fact that they are technically too hard for a party to beat. But they also have their plane shift that they can use once a day. So you can be like, okay, I'm clearly about to kill the party. I'll plane shift her out. Like, you have that, like, she doesn't have to just like make up some excuse to leave. She's like, no, you're endangering me. And it has reasons for why she would do that.
Yeah.
But you can take a couple of them down in the meantime.
I think it would be more fun if each of the sisters then escapes the next one, and then you have that bickeringness, and then they escape, and then at the end they're all there.
I want the big showdown with all 3.
Absolutely. Especially if they get coven spells as well, which is, which are pretty brutal as well. Actually, talking about coven spells as well, like the cauldron at the end, what I didn't realize, again, reading through sort of the magical artifacts and stuff, so obviously it can do certain things in terms of like giving benefits and stuff, but if it is broken, it breaks like covens like magic altogether, so that they can't spell cast together, and you're like, but across the whole multiverse, and you're like, holy shit, that is such a big thing that no one will ever know about unless they break it. And then if Tasha comes back, there's going to be absolute hell to pay.
There's a lot of cool stuff you can do that they're never going to do, I feel like, in the book. And it's like, if they happen to run around 4 times, touch their nose, and then hit the floor without any prior knowledge of needing to do that, the best thing in the world will happen. And you're like, oh.
They'll do a solar eclipse.
Yeah, right. Well, the solar eclipse thing can come up. I like the solar eclipse thing. That's where they're not just going in to fight the hags.
Yes.
Good, because if you start liaising with Bavlorna, she'll be like, my bitch of a sister. Like, and she'll give away the secret, I think she's got the secret about Scabatha.
Yes, I think so
she's
too.
like, yeah, the first person she sees is invisible to her for the rest of the day.
Wild.
Awful. What an awful thing. But like, they don't have, or they do have the secret about Bavlorna from one of the unicorns on the merry-go-round at the carnival, about what I like to call the exposition unicorns. Oh yeah, jump on, they'll know some shit, and they know everything.
They're like, we know everything about the story.
Yeah, what do you need to know to move on? And like the running in widdershins, so running in counterclockwise.
Yeah,
she's allergic to it. She just starts sneezing. Brilliant. And then Endlin Moongrave believes she'll die during an eclipse, so is just terrified of eclipses. But and then again, you've got like the shadow of the twin of their names.
Gleam and Glisser.
Yeah. And I think that's cool. And like the whole being able to detach someone's shadow, very Peter Pan. Like, I love that vibe. I really like Endlin is definitely my favourite.
You and I are on the same page about it. You either had the frog horrible swallowing one, you have the creepy toy lady.
I just want her to die.
The Scabatha who has, again, her cool thing is like she has a key in her back which winds, like it goes round, like normally, like if she's in a good mood, it stops if she's in a furious mood. And I'm just there like, oh, I hate anything that is like an indication that things are going to go down, and something like that sounds good. But she has stuff like hers. I find hers is the creepiest because you have stuff like Pincushion, which is like some sort of doll which oversees the workshop, which is horrible. Which I think was a doll that was made for her by Baba Yaga to keep her company as a small child.
Oh, is that right? Oh, I forgot I missed that.
The reason that the carnival is kind of a big thing is that they know what happened to Mr. Light and Mr. Witch, how they got the carnival. And so in order to keep that secret together, they say that we want to prey on the people who come in and aren't protected by your magic. And then they have these little guides, these little things that come and take things away. So like your gifts that you were talking about at the beginning. And one of them is just called So Pig, a little girl, a ghoulish girl with a pig mask who just stands there really, like very much like,
I hate her.
Oh, what's she called? The 7 Days Later girl.
In the ring. Samira?
Samira, yeah, very much Samira, who you just find in a random cupboard in Scabatha's workshop, and you're like, it's just horrible.
I'm like, no, that thing, bang.
Shut the door.
And there are a few moments where it's like, just shut the door on that. No, I'm not going to do that. No.
Like, I think that's the thing. Like, I know we're sort of laughing about that sort of the horror and the creepiness of it, but I think that's what really, to me, as always, it makes the stuff. But it's such a whimsical thing. But if it was too whimsical and too nicely, I think people wouldn't engage with it as much. Yeah, I think they'd get bored of it.
It'd be fun for like a one shot of like silly, but then you'd be like, okay, now I'd like to like do something.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to talk about, because I think it's a really interesting, almost like issue, and I don't quite know what will happen when my group if they get to this point. Scabatha has her rocking horse.
Yes.
Which is actually a unicorn that she's changed and taken the horn off. And the unicorn horn is something that on the story tracker at the beginning, roll or decide where it's going to be. And the unicorn horn is one of the things that can unfreeze Zybilna. But obviously, if you come across the rocking horse and you put the horn back in, the unicorn's got his horn back now.
Yeah.
You don't have the horn.
Yeah.
And there's nothing about, maybe there is and I've missed it, but I don't think there's anything about them saying, oh, and if you do this, don't worry, you'll get, like, Eladon will give you a gift of the power of the unicorn. And, like, how are they meant to know that if you hold the unicorn horn by the cauldron will work? Like, I don't know. And, like, you want to bring Eladon back because you meet Eladon's mate. Yes. And she's like, I'm really sad.
Yeah, I need my partner back. Yeah.
Another person that you need to go and help because no one else is possibly able to do it. And I want to help the unicorn over anything else, to be perfectly frank with you. Like, I really like Lamorna.
Yeah.
And I don't really know what's meant to happen if you give the horn back to Eladon. Is that like, well, oh shit, Zybilna's fucked then?
You know what? That's a good point. I don't really know. It's one of those things where, like you said, you can roll randomly to where this unicorn horn is. But I do wonder if there's a way that maybe there is like a spare one in the castle somewhere, or because they have that library. That was my favourite person in the library. There's just a library that's part of another dimension and realm and that hasn't been affected by this freezing power. And the person that's there is this very grumpy librarian, but it has like a cloak over him with a hunchback and a horrible spider underneath it.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, again, a fantastic NPC portrait. And you're like, I'm not going to touch that with a barge pole.
No, that's not the one. Really?
But that person whose name, Sean the Hunchback, they're called.
Sean the Hunchback, very good.
They can give you a lot of information. about the place, because they're okay with Sibylna. Like they've let them have the little realm of the library and all that sort of thing. But apart from that, there's a couple of people who know. Like they've got like the assistant and maybe Thinnings, the butler might know.
Thinnings is weird.
Ugh.
Also, all the Jabberwock stuff.
Oh.
And it's like, I want to do a Jabberwocky thing, but it's sort of kind of half there and kind of half not.
Yes. So in that final bit, this it talks about this idea of a Jabberwocky that Sibylna has sort of like had an agreement with, but obviously now Sibylna is frozen in time thanks to the hags. It is now hanging around the castle, and again, some really cool stuff about like how it will focus on one person until they are dead, etc. And they're horrible and big, but it's just in the castle, and it does say like the main point of this chapter is to kill or to get rid of the Jabberwocky in some way. And there's a bloody beak, this massive fuck off owl that you can use.
You can find the Vorpal sword. You can find one of the options.
So it's very cool, but again, it's like, that's a cool thing, but I don't understand how it's connected to anything else, because like, are the witches like, you must kill anyone that comes near the cauldron?
Yeah, no, I don't know.
Everything is just, for me, a little bit too piecemeal, it's a bit too bitty, and to pull that narrative together, I think like, I don't know whether they need to have like more of a recurring like enemy, that like a mini boss that comes and is like, oh, I'll get you at the heart's desire, that's where I'll be, and,
right, exactly.
Or use that League of Malevolence to like, they're the ones that are, they know that they've got the unicorn core, now we need to take that off them in some way, and then just constantly ambushing them in some way
to like make people realize that, this unicorn horn is actually kind of a big deal. Releasing Sibylna from temporal stasis can be accomplished in one of three ways. So shattering the cauldron with a frostbrand or flame tongue weapon. So how are you meant to know that you're meant to use one of them? You're not, I don't think, unless it says something. Maybe it does, but I don't think it does.
No.
Touching Egwil's cauldron with a unicorn horn while reciting a poem called The Witch Queen's Cauldron, which also ends the time freezing magic throughout the palace. Someone needs to tell you you're going to have to say the poem as well. Someone's got to, which is fine. You can, there are NPCs that can do that. And then touching Sibylna with a unicorn horn while speaking her true name, Natasha, which I think is that's one that feels more pointed at when you find out all this stuff about her.
That makes the most sense.
And the whole palace is just like, look who she is. Oh, wow. And then once she is freed, Sibylna can use the horn, the poem, and the cauldron to break the spell on the rest of the palace.
Which makes more sense.
Because it's her shit. Like, let her do the shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I feel like there's not enough with Sibylna at the end. Like, it's literally like a few pages once she's free. And you're like, this is like one of the biggest characters in D&D lore. Like, this is Tasha. Like, there are books about her just named after her, which isn't even about her. And I want more Tasha.
It feels like sometimes like, are you going to have to fight Sibylna like at some point? And it's not like that at all. She's going to be presumably very grateful that she's been released, and then does something with the hags who also then fly Prismere and leave. And so it'd be just cool to have a little bit more about it. Just maybe for me, I might be like starting my sessions with flashbacks towards Sibylna. Maybe when you're introducing the hags, each of them, maybe they've all had a poignant moment with Sibylna at certain points, and just have that flashback, those GM scenes, etc., just so that the players know that they have a connection to Sibylna. Because I don't think it's obvious, really, unless you talk to the people going, oh yes, the Hourglass Coven, yeah, they've taken it from Sibylna. It's like, oh, they've taken over. It's like, oh, but there's actually a familiar connection with them, and so it is more personal than just a play for power.
She could get a bit annoyed if you're like, hey, aren't you Tasha?
Yeah, you're like,
but she's still, because of like rules of reciprocity and all of the things in the Feywild, she's like, what do you want? Like, thanks.
Yeah, just go away.
Just go away. Like, it's done now. And I just feel like the ending could be a bigger, because there's a world in which you just sort of get there and go, Natasha, and she goes, cheers. Thanks so much. Do you want to go back? I can do that. And they all go, yeah. And you go, great. Woomph. And you're like, cool, we're done now. Like, and obviously, that would be bad DMing if that is what you did. But it feels like even when she's freed, it would be nice if she was suddenly like, who are you? What are you doing here? There has to be some way of calming her down.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's Tasha. She'll kill you. Like,
someone has managed to pull the wool over her eyes. Like the way they got the thing to freeze in the first place is that somehow they distracted Tasha long enough to get the unicorn horn, say the witch's chant for over a minute, for then the freezing magic to happen. And I'm like, I've played with players like a minute of combat goes like that, in the sense of like, they're just, there's no way someone could have done it interrupted. And especially with Sibylna and Tasha, like, she's a powerful archfey. Of course she's going to know who's touching her cauldron.
Like, exactly.
So I don't know. It was for me, I was just like, it has to be something even, I don't know, like just a big old curse or something like that. It has to be more instantaneous than that.
That's where this domain of dread stuff, I think, is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're like, she gets freed, and then she's like, oh no, something's wrong. She's like, and you can do her being grateful and being like, thank you so much. Like, what do you want? I'll do it for you. And then you just hear this like almighty rip, and it's like fucking Bavrovia.
Barovia.
Bavrovia. It's like Pavlona. Barovia is suddenly like descending into the Palace of Heart's Desire, and it's like, and then you have to fight like almost with Tasha to like and that would be cool. Like that I would like.
I think joining forces with Tasha,
even just against the hags or something. Like
absolutely.
That would be. So I was just reading, if you use the Lost Things adventure hook and you're nice to Sibylna, because so for the other hook she'll offer you a wish, so you can have whatever your heart's desire. But then she offers to harness the time dilating power of the Feywild to send the characters back to their home plane as the children they once were, so that they can live their lives over without having suffered the terrible losses brought to them in Prismere. And like, that seems wild.
Yeah.
And then you end like going into the Witchlight Carnival with a ticket, and it like takes you back in time. And it's like, wait, that means this never happened.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to just undo that like whole adventure. So I don't think I'm going to offer my players that.
Like in all fairy tales, like, the whole point is the journey, and not like, oh, I've got it now. It's the whole point of realizing that this is the person, and that they need to have some sort of flaw, etc. Yeah, that's the whole point of Hero's journey. So it does seem a bit like, and now we can restart, and you're
do it again. And then you're like, cool, right, level 0 character, we're going to start again in the carnival.
Yeah, it sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah. Who wants to do Lost Mines of Phandelver? It's like, you've got to level 8, back to 1 we go. So yeah, I don't like that idea. But I think, my plan with my group is they will go back and they'll be more of a party. And then my plan is Sibylna's going to be able to have stopped the Feywild and the Domains of Dread all linking up, but the planes in general have just gone a bit funny. And so there's going to be like some of the elemental plane going back into the material plane. So it's going to be like each of their homes will have some kind of elemental plane thing. And it'll turn out it's actually a bigger thing, and all of the planes are weak for some reason that I haven't come up with yet.
DM logic.
We'll find something.
I liked your idea about this idea that now, we have to prevent the Domains of Dread from infecting everything else. And so then it plays back into that idea of the carnival returns, the dark carnival, and then there's ships over and we're meeting Isolde again.
That's the perfect final one, isn't it? You get back to the carnival and then that's when you see the rip, and it's the other carnival coming through, and it's like, oh boy.
Yeah, it's like, and she's not going to be happy.
And she's there with her weird sword. Yeah.
It's like, the sword is here now. We are screwed.
Yeah. Oh, so good.
What would you say so far? Obviously, I know you're playing through, etc. But is there a part that you really, really love, or something that you're like, I can't wait to get to? Like, is there a part that you're like, if you were running Wild Beyond the Witch, like everyone has to do, if you see what I mean, because it adds so much to it. I
mean, I'm really excited about Yon in general, but in particular the theatre.
Yes.
And just because it will suit my group perfectly. And Endelyn, I think, you can almost logic with Endelyn a little bit compared to some of the other ones. Yeah, Motherhorn in general, the theatre, and like all the people in backstage in the theatre.
The big thing about that, so we've talked about those role-playing cards before, but you also have this sort of almost improv game.
Yeah.
The script, this idea that you have to perform a part of a play in front of Endelyn, and you have lines, and it is like, it's scenes from a hat or lines from your pocket, essentially, which I love. That's one of my favourite improv games, is that you get people to write down like famous phrases or lines from a song, etc., and you put them in your pockets, and you do a scene, and every so often you pick out a line and you just have to say it as you read it. And it's one of my favorite things, because you just people just go, oh fuck, that's completely changed what the scene is, and you get like 80 lines from stage fright. And I just this is what I'd love to do it in person as a result. Like, and I can imagine as if all your friends are sort of theatre people, that it's going to be proper like acting and improv, and that is going to be so much fun.
And we only play in person as well, and I do think this is a good in person one,
because it talks about as well as like, as the play is happening, that maybe some people have to go and distract and maybe go behind the scenes and stuff like that. So I can imagine that if you're again, I don't know how I would do it necessarily, because I'm someone who does love doing props and all, thinking about the other ways of doing it. If you're performing the play and then other people are like having to dip in and out or come around and stuff, I don't know. It's just, I just love that sort of stuff. When you're like, hello, it's like a randomly out of nowhere. Behold, I am here. And it says that even if your character is knocked unconscious or dies, if they've had a part in play, they have to come back on at some point. So this idea of almost like Weekend at Bernie's like type thing, where you bring a character over, they're like, oh, a bit tired,
just moving their arms. And the other thing I want to happen is, you know, at the end, hopefully they've sort of found, like, you know, the displacer beast's cub like getting Star back home. And like, I think it would be nice to go back to the carnival at the end. It's not in the book, but
no,
I love the carnival. I really love the carnival. That first chapter is so good for new players. Although my players were like, okay, cool, so we have to get to Prismere. Right, I understand. Like, ignore everything and just like aim for all the key story beats. And I was like, okay, maybe we could go on some rides, you know, maybe I was having like NPCs being like, well, you've got 2 hours until that thing happens, so you might as well enjoy the carnival. Like,
that's so funny.
Being like, hey, if you enjoy the carnival, it will help you out later down the line, guys. Like, do it.
I love that. Like, because I'm the opposite way around. I'm like, no, I'm going to be Baldur's Gate this and talk to every single person before we leave and make sure I've got all the lore so that all my options are unlocked at the next level.
They were not keen on that. They were like, right, there's a Kenku ruining things for everyone. I know, throw a javelin at it. And I was like, oh, okay, cool.
That's the other thing. So yeah, the kettle steam again, an idea to use this sort of character saying that Sibylna's not answering my stuff, but they can't come with you. You never talk to them,
and they can't come with you. Why? Like, you know, and that is obviously, we don't want NPCs hanging around with the party the whole time. But on what world did the warlock go, no, you must never find me?
You must never come to my realm or my palace. Yeah,
other people can, but you in particular, because I've chosen you, you know, that's a no.
I thought to myself, Kettlestein will definitely be able to check in with the players. Maybe couldn't go for whatever reason. Their powers are blocked because Sibylna is blocked, but they could at least message or send or do sending or something. Just to be like, how's things going? Trying to find out about my patron. You know, just like, here is the reminder that you're getting through.
A little like, ding, 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 you have mail.
Exactly. Talks about like obviously Kettlestein being a Kenku, and obviously the whole thing of like, how do you role play a Kenku in the sense of like, you know, you talk about it in the third person, like it sounds like a steam from a kettle, or that was the thing I did like with the role playing cards as well, is that it talked about the traits and, you know, the personality bonds and stuff like that, and it said I get angry like something hammering on a tongs, and then says what the sound is, so that you could describe that. And I just thought that was quite cool to have that as the role playing card as well. I just thought that was quite a nice little touch to be like, here's what Kenkus do. They mimic, they don't have their own voice.
Really nice. And you know, having conversations as Kettle Steam, like trying to just say things back at people that they've already said, they get so angry. We should probably quickly talk about like the races and the backgrounds that they added.
Yeah.
Like the races, I mean, Fairy and Harengon, they're great. Like they're both great. I think they're both brilliant. They're both quite strong.
I was going to say, do you have any in your party that are a Harengon or a Fairy?
Not in the one I've been talking about the most, but someone else did make a Harengon, and someone else made a Fairy actually in one of the other ones.
Yeah.
I mean, flight speed on Fairy, but you know, it's like, oh, good, they're gone. Okay, great. Yeah, no puzzles for you.
Yeah, that's the only thing, because I've had that with like previous adventures, and then we've obviously had stuff like Aarakocra or anything that has a fly speed, like an owling, etc. I've had to say to players like, look, I appreciate
that you can.
Yeah, you can do that, but yeah, certainly these older modules, they expect you to do some thought rather than just fly over it. Yeah, and I understand that you can do it because it's a natural thing. So yeah, I have in the past, I've said like, try not to pick anything that flies at level 1. Like obviously later on when you gain it, that's totally fine. And I know some campaigns I've seen, but some of them like, oh, I'm an Aarakocra, but for whatever reason I can't fly till level 4 or something because something's wrong with my wing.
The feathers haven't grown in properly,
exactly,
and the flying feathers aren't there. Yeah,
so that's all right. But I do love the Harengon.
Me too.
Again, beautifully drawn and beautiful illustrations.
Beautiful.
What I did quite like about it is that there's this band of almost like Robin Hood type Riggans essentially that you come across.
Oh, they're nasty. Yeah,
they're not very nice when you get to thither. But what I like about when it describes them at the end, it said, hey, not all Haragons are like trying to cheat you out of things.
Yeah.
So, you know, it just depends on your upbringing and where you're from, etc. So I quite liked how already it was like, hey, you're not evil if you're picking a Haragon. You know, you are happy-go-lucky. Like,
you're a bunny. Oh, bunny.
I love the idea of like, hey, why don't we all be all be Haragons. Oops, all Haragons.
Yeah,
You know,
oops, all Haragons. Absolutely,
so
I love it.
Probably be better than Oops, all fairies, because then you just be like, oh god damn it, they just get everywhere.
And then the other thing is the backgrounds, and then you've got Feylost and Witchlight Hand.
Yes. Does any of your parties have those backgrounds out of interest?
No, because Witchlight Hand, I think they could have done, but I just steered them away from it because I was like, I think I just want you all to be childhood friends.
Yeah.
And the running away to a carnival, it doesn't really fit with the lost things hook, because like, why haven't you found your thing yet? You've been at the carnival the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, why are you choosing now to go look for it? So I find that quite hard to like work in and make it believable. So I sort of left that one off. And Feylost, the idea being that when you were a kid, you went to the Feywild and then you've come back, but now you're going back to the it to me, it almost feels like it should be like you're from the Feywild, but you've grown up in the material.
Yeah.
Which I guess is kind of what it is. But I don't know. Feylost feels like you've had this very epic life before, and then you're like, I'm a level 1 adventurer.
I agree with that, because especially like if you tie that in with like the Lost Things one as well, I don't know, I don't think you can. I feel like both those, like you said, those backgrounds, I think they have to go for that second, like the warlock asks you to do something. Certainly because like that Witchlight Carnival hand, like it makes sense, like, you know, 3 people from the party, they are adventurers and they're going to the carnival, but there's an inside person or 2 people that work there. Who I've been
talking to as well about this. He'll help.
That to me makes total sense. And yeah, the Phaedos stuff, it doesn't make sense to me at all for this particular adventure.
It's not good for this campaign, basically. I think it's good for the other campaigns, because really you'd want them to have been taken to Prismere. Otherwise,
it should already be there. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And then if they've come back, but then how much do they know? Because at what point in time, like when Zybilna got frozen, like when were you there? Like I didn't understand the timings of it all. And you can kind of hand wave Feywild timings, but I don't know. I was just like, I just feel like, it could be better.
It's a very cool, like, one of it. It felt like something that I feel should have gone into maybe that Domains of Delight, like, supplement that they had. But here's how you make a Domain of Delight, which I really hope that in the future they do a similar, you know, how we've talked about Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. I hope they do something similar for Domains of Delight.
I don't think they will, because I think they've released that so they don't do it.
So they don't have to do it. And I think that's such a shame.
I think it's such a shame.
Because there's so many Domains of Dread, and it's like, what else? What are the
more Feywild? Where's the Summer Court? Talk to me about Titania. Oberon, give me all of the Shakespeare. Thank you.
So yeah, I don't know. I think, like I said, I feel that particular background should have gone in that supplement, perhaps, just to be like, here's more Feywild stuff. But I don't know. I think they were like, we need to include stuff for players and
Fey thing,
And I'm like, yeah, I guess you don't have to. Like the magical items are fun, and like you know, it talks about the different ways that the hags travel. So you have this bobbing lily pad, which like has horrible like tendril feet
underneath,
which I hate that. And then you got this like weird ornithopter type thing, this sort of flying.
thing. And then obviously the rocking horse that is actually a unicorn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was one that I picked up. I'll find it now. There's one which is like a compass of some sort, but it only works on the material plane, and like we're not on the material plane.
For most of the adventure,
the Orb of Direction, it's called. But whilst holding this orb, you can use an action to determine which way is north. This property only functions on the material plane, and you're like, what?
Great. When I'm never there,
exactly.
I do feel like there's a few bits that you're like, when did you come up with this bit, and where did this come about?
I'll tell you what, my favourite bit reading it was, and something I'd be interested to play around with a little bit more. So in Palace of Heart's Desire, again, it's 52 rooms est. It's a big sort of dungeon at different levels of stuff, but some of it is locked off depending on if you put a crown on either a lion or a stag. And it feels very Resident Evil vibes. Like you can only unlock certain things.
Such a puzzle.
Yeah, I like that. But there needs to be more like closer things to switch it. Because if you're like,
exactly, you just have someone down there the whole time, and you just like send them a message being like, "Now put it on the stag." Like, it's not fun. Like that,
especially because those two sort of statues, they're in the gardens in their separate towers. It's quite far away from each other.
And like, there's a different challenge to get to each of them as well. I think I can't quite remember. Maybe once you've got to each of them once, you could get like a button from each of them, and you could press that button.
Yeah, first it's like a normal crown, but if you put it on the wrong person the first time, that person gets banished, and then you've kind of locked half the
it's like you can't go through there ever again. No, you're done.
Like, well, that's half the lore gone, I guess.
Yeah, no, stop that.
I like the idea of having these two guardians, and I like the locking of the door puzzles a little bit, but I would just make them a little bit closer so you don't have to go miles back to reset things. It's not a video game. It's not something like you have to teleport back. I don't know. There's just I like that idea. I like that mechanic a little bit, but there wasn't enough of it.
Maybe I'll do like a thing where you get like half an orb, and then when you have both, you can like twist it to be whichever one you want, but you have to go to each of the towers to get it.
That I like.
So then you can like, once you've gone to those towers, you've got it with you, and you just have to.
I love that. Yeah, because it's about appeasing these two very sort of like egotistical beings who don't want to talk to the other person, even though they both work together. So I did quite like that sort of description. But yeah, absolutely. If you've got the
some
two
kind of magic thing, then
you're like, oh my god, we don't ever have to go talk to the stag or the lion.
Yeah, but you have to have both. You can't just have one of them, otherwise you have to go talk to them.
Absolutely.
And maybe you have to be nice to them before they'll give it to you, right? And you can't.
Is there any part of it that you're not dealing with at all, or you just like this is the worst bit of you that you hope that you never have to run in Wild Beyond the Witchlight? Would you say?
I've taken out some of the like random like fetch quests. I've just been like, we don't need this. Like this isn't. You're adding a lot of time, and it's not. I think maybe with a different group I would include them, but like for example, we're around the Bullywug area. There are so many rooms that just have something in.
They don't forward the plot, do they? Yeah.
You don't learn anything. It doesn't do anything. Like there's one bit where there's just a big frog, and the guy's been eaten by the frog and gets split up, and he's like, can I just leave you with the frog for a minute? 5
minutes. Also goes gets cleans up. Yeah.
And he just leaves, and then if you stand too close to the frog will try and eat one of the characters. And it's funny, but it's like, but are you meant to be learning about how to beat Bavlorna? Because it's, I don't know, like, and it's like, I want to do it, but also my group, it's their first D&D campaign. They have no idea how long it's going to take, because they speed ran Witchlight Carnival, because they were like, right, I've got a plan, let's do this. So we did it in like 3 hours. They did all of the Witchlight Carnival, which it should be longer than that. And I was like, you can stay for a bit longer, and they were like, no, we're ready, we've worked out how to get there. But they were really leaning into their characters wanting to get their things back, right? So they went through, and then so we had our second session, and they were like, cool, so do you think we'll finish this chapter in one session? I was like, no, you won't. And then so they obviously didn't finish it at the end of that chapter, and we're now on like going into session like 5 or 6, and they still haven't finished chapter 2, and they're like, I don't understand why this one's taking so much longer. And it's like,
that's how it works. It's
a story, like, don't worry, it's okay, I'm not knocking points off. And they're also desperate to level up now. They're like, are we level 4 now? And I'm like, no no, you're not. You've just become level 3. You don't get another level yet. But they're learning, bless them.
I take down a couple of the NPCs. Like, I think that some of them are very interesting, but some of them are absolutely wild. So, like, just speaking of that chapter in Hither, there's that random satyr that's in a cage.
Oh, he's gone. Yeah, I got him.
It's just described as naked
satyr. Yeah,
and then gets released and then just runs around the kitchen in some sort of like a carry-on film type thing.
Yeah.
And it's just a bit weird, because it's the way it's described as is naked, because it doesn't have any stuff on it, and then wraps around an apron, and you're like, I don't need this. I don't think he's important. It's just a nice, happy-go-lucky person that you save.
He's not important. And like, it's one of those ones that when you read it, you're like, oh, maybe this comes up later. And the other one is Octavian, the like elf who's lost his heart and is very sad. And again, just a very sad person.
Sad.
They're all so sad. And he's not sad. He's completely emotionless because he has no thing. And you just get it back for him. And then that's it.
It's all just nice things. Like, if you're willing to help someone else, they're willing to help you. But it's all very flavoursome, which is, again, it's great as a first game sort of thing. But for me, I'm just like, I'd slim it down a little bit. There's a little bit too much in terms of fluff. And there's no problem, because I want to get to stage fries,
I like a little bit of fluff, but not to the point of it not having a purpose.
I think there was one other person I was a bit like, who is this person? I think it's later on in Yon, this idea of this elf prince that's lighting the beacons almost.
Yes.
And again, very interesting, if sad thing about being cursed.
I like that story.
But it doesn't add anything. It's just like, we'll help this person, another side quest as they go up these 8 beacons to light.
The one with that, which I always thought that is there for, is it's how you can get back to the material plane. without going to Palace of Heart's Desire. So I almost don't want to give my players that option.
Yeah.
Because, what if they then go, oh, cool, well, we've done our bit. Like, someone will deal with Zybilna, I'm sure.
What I quite liked about that is that obviously this elf prince is just doing it, it's never giving up. That's the whole thing. But then they're being
hounded by the
yeah, these creatures have been transformed that used to be theatre makers. So that the way you sort of do your sort of Undertale pacifist run is by doing a performance yourself, and they're like, that's pretty good, and then they leave.
You know what? Yes, good performance, well done. Particularly if you had acting lessons.
Yeah, exactly.
From the clown in chapter 1.
Let's talk about that, because you said that you had a problem with the sort of the fighting element. So it talks about it being a complete
this bullshit idea that you can do it without rolling initiative, which you can. But to do that, you have to make deals with the hags to help the hags out. And like with the Herringons, you have to give them your memories. So you basically have to be a pushover if you don't want to roll initiative. And you just have to let bad things continuously happen to you.
Yeah.
The Herringons will immediately fight you if you say no. Like, that's what they do. So you're rolling initiative then. If they go to hit you, you're into initiative. And I just think it's like, you can do it and you don't have to have big battles. Like, I think that's...
No. Yeah, I think you have to have some battles for sure.
I do think you actually have to be really... Smart isn't even the word. You have to be really willing to not go into battle, to not fight anyone, to the point that, like, Bavlorna will be like, yeah, sure, work for me. Go get this, go get this. And some of the things she wants you to get are things the book wants you to basically have to fight to get. So you have to find a different way again. It's so much lateral thinking involved. And that's not a bad thing.
No.
But I think you'd have to be kind of selfish characters.
Yeah.
And like not nice characters to get away with never fighting anyone.
This is the thing. It's like I don't think there's anything wrong with having combat in D&D. I'm very bad at running combat myself, and I loathe it when it happens. But I think sometimes it's about like how you use it. Are they just willy-nilly murder hobo killing everything? And if they're doing that's awful. And also I don't think that would work here at all. But then it's about like using the stuff to your advantage. So if you know that certain creatures like certain things because they've been obvious about it, this whole idea of like like you said, the etiquette rules and all that sort of thing, if they abide by that, they're going to get advantages on certain stuff. And like it says that you have to fight the Jabberwock at the end to make it worthwhile.
But I guess you can release the owl, right? And let the owl have your battle for you. But
yeah, and I'm just like it doesn't feel heroic. It doesn't feel heroic that you've got rid of this horrible thing.
That's exactly it. Yeah. It feels like you become complicit in a lot of the stuff the hags are doing. And I don't know, I feel like you wouldn't be involved in it as much.
No.
To me, I liked the idea of it. And then when I was reading it, I was like, there's still so much about combat in here. And it seems like quite an integral point.
I wonder maybe what I'm leaning towards to now with my D&D, and I don't know about yourself. Like, I've got to that point now where I really loathe, like, turn by turn, oh, they've got this ability, so it's going to do this, and how many feet, all that sort of thing. I think I've got to that point now where I think it needs to be over within, 5 moves or whatever that is, and then be like, what's the cool thing that you do? What's the cool thing that you do? This is the cool thing that I'm doing. What do you give up in order for it not to decimate you? Like, that's it. And just talking it through in this conversation style, and a lot of RPGs do that nowadays. Otherwise, you are playing Baldur's Gate 3. You're doing the video game aspect of it. I don't mind that, but I just don't have time for it. I want to get to Zybilna. I want them to experience like this whole story that we've been telling and go, oh shit, we've gained so much along the way, rather than like, we killed this thing and we killed
this thing, and
it just becomes lots of a big numbers game. Even though I know both you and I are like, nerds, numbers, especially when you think about Wild Beyond the Witch, like the sort of the backstories that we get stuff like LGBT characters. There's a non-binary character.
There is
in there. I read into sort of Mr. Light and Mr. Witch like being a couple. That's what I was reading through that, and I thought that was amazing. That it was just sort of like there, and it's just this is, to me, that's important for me as a storyteller rather than fighting stuff. So I think it's trying its best, but I don't think there's any way you would survive this adventure without doing a little bit of combat.
And I think if your players knew you can get through the whole thing without combat, and then they got into a combat, I would feel really bad if I'd been told that, and then suddenly we were in a combat. But it's actually really hard to do. I don't like how much they advertised it. And then, because I feel like there's probably a lot of groups who were like, oh, cool, we won't ever get into a fight. And then we're like, oh, no, we got into a fight. Did we mess up?
Oh, we've done it wrong. Yeah.
We've done something badly here. So I would quite like to try it. Like, if someone ever wants to run it with no combat, obviously I know all the secrets.
I think you'd have to be everyone who's read it through at least once, and then somebody runs it. So the main story beats. But also, I wonder if it's because D&D recently like Wizards are trying to lean into like the actual play stuff, because they're like, oh, watching combat when you're not playing in it is possibly the most boring thing for audiences, perhaps. So maybe they're trying to be like, for streaming purposes, you've only got 2 hours to stream, we're going to say this so that it's easy. You know, what I gathered from the Spelljammer stuff was like, here are 10 chapters and they always end on a cliffhanger. So you could do it as like a one session thing for streaming purposes. And I was like, yeah, but it wasn't a good book anyway, but it's fine. So...
And it's also not going to take one session for some of those chapters. It's like, that's at least 3.
Is there any sort of final thoughts that you have about Witchlight? If anyone was thinking, oh, I'd really want to run it now.
I'd say run it. I really do love it. Like, I know we've talked a lot about things that they could have done better.
I think just to improve, yeah, absolutely.
The story is fun. It's really good for beginners, both DM or players. Use the Lost Things hook. You don't need to, the Warlock doesn't need to send you on a quest. Like, have a personal connection to the story.
Yes.
I would just say, just think about how you want to maybe end it before you start, because I think the ending can be a little underwhelming. Not that I've got to the ending yet. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe when we get to the ending, I'll be like, you know what? I didn't need all of this Domain of Dread stuff. And I would say look at the Domains of Dread, because they're so much more fleshed out about what a domain is than the Domain of Delight. Because Domain of Delight just appears to be an area in the Feywild, whereas Domain of Dread, there's all this lore and backstory and cool stuff. And so try and work out what in your world that crossover means.
Yeah.
I think if you do have players who are like, oh, we don't want to get into combat, you can be like, well, actually, I'm adding in a thing where there is a bit of combat and you will have to fight these things, because these are things that are going to kill. And then therefore they won't feel as bad if they get into other combat. Maybe that's the sneaky way of doing it.
I think that's fair.
And then look at the other carnival. Look at Isolde's carnival, because it's cool.
I'd love to play games in that carnival, and how they are just like dark mirror images of what you do in the Witchlight Carnival, and you're like, this is just horrible. I don't want any of these things.
I want to have fun with all the characters. The characters are great. Yeah. Like, if you like a silly voice, you can do a silly voice for pretty much every character. The Bullywugs are just brilliant. I've just run the Bullywugs and I just think they're so funny. Like, they're these little like frogs in like Regency outfits being like, I don't know what's going on. And they're so stupid, and it's beautiful. It's just enjoy the silly in it. Enjoy the whimsy.
Into it. 100%. I see this. Well, Emily, thank you so much. Where can people find you? Like, what's your upcoming projects? If people want to find out more about your work, where can they find it?
You can find me mostly over at RP Geeks D&D. That's on Twitch, on socials, on YouTube, all of that. That's where most of my stuff is. We've got some previous series that are really great that you should go check out. We've got our original D&D campaign, which is quite long, where we took D&D 5th edition, reskinned it all to make there not be magic and everyone have to be like science behind what they were doing, because that's our thing. Then we did a Starfinder campaign, the Absalom Files. That was 12 episodes. That was great fun.
Good.
We did a lovely series called Cult, GM'd by a fantastic lady called Fiona.
Oh, I don't know who she is.
Oh, she sounds great. And that was really fun and very scary. We're in the middle of our Masks campaign, the superhero RPG, and Masks 2044. And then following that, we have a series called Orbital Blues Black Star, which features, again, as a player this time, however, Fiona.
That's me, yeah.
So, and that was so much fun. We've pre-recorded all of those.
Yeah.
That was wild. So, yes, that's what we're doing at the moment. You can follow me on socials at MZWB. That's EMZYWB. But to be honest, I mainly just retweet RP Geek stuff. So probably just go follow them. But thank you for having me. This has been really fun.
Thank you. Well, I was just going to say the final thing was that you're doing monthly Blood on the Clock Tower streams as well. Yes.
We're doing that. We're venturing into Blood on the Clock Tower over RP Geeks, often featuring Fiona. And they're live streams on Mondays, first Monday of every month at 7 p.m. Over on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/RP Geeks D&D.
Yeah.
And it's very fun. I do really love Blood on the Clock Tower.
If you love like Werewolf, Mafia, that social deduction element, but a lot more information and a lot more people panicking about stuff.
Werewolf on steroids is what I like to call it.
And obviously, I know you won't mind me saying this, but you're such an amazing storyteller because you do lots of commentary behind the scenes of going, oh, I wouldn't have done that move, but it's great.
It's like, that was a really stupid thing that Fiona just did.
But I think that's very valuable. So if you're, as a DM even, like if you're thinking like, I'm not sure how things work, having Emily talk through the game mechanics and talking through people as the game is playing and then coming back and then hearing the commentary of like, Interesting. It is so valuable for that. So it's great for just running stuff in general. I'd highly recommend checking out those.
Yeah, we've got some previous episodes on our YouTube as well, so you can see some of the previous ones there. So
yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Emily.
Thanks, Fiona.
We'll definitely have you back on. We'll probably talk about Domains of Dread or something. So
yeah, let's do that. Let's just come up with a horror one, and you can scare me throughout the whole thing.
Perfect.
Yeah.